Define. Chapter 5 of Management and Integrated Approach, Business Level Strategy Part 2, Force 3, the threat of substitutes. The possible threat of substitutes, or the appearance of real substitutes, can also limit the profitability of an industry. Take the example of the local taxi industry in many markets around the world where it was quite profitable with few threats of substitutes and high entry barriers due to government restrictions and licensing requirements. Companies like Uber that provide links between passengers and drivers have upended the traditional taxi service in many major cities around the world. Uber has been able to circumvent the traditional restrictions on taxi regulations and licenses in the cities in which it operates by claiming that it is a technology platform for matching people with specific transportation needs. It asserts that it is not an actual transportation company and therefore should not be subject to the typical regulations that apply to taxis and limos, thereby bypassing an important entry barrier. Launched in 2009, Uber began as a private limo service and quickly evolved into a broader ride-matching service. Uber has a proprietary technology platform that enables it to connect local drivers with passengers. By 2014, the company had rapidly expanded to over 85 cities in 32 countries and had become a significant competitive threat to local taxi and limousine service companies. 41 Many passengers were happy to substitute the traditional taxi service for an Uber ride. Some customers found taxis to be poorly maintained and uncomfortable. Other customers were frustrated that taxis refused to service certain areas in the city. 42 With Uber, passengers generally pay about the same as a traditional cab, but the application provides other conveniences, including a wider coverage area. Passengers who have downloaded the app on their phones can track cars in their area, which allows them to better manage their time. Payment is also much easier. All charges are made through a credit card that passengers register with Uber. The company takes care of the payment process, so no money changes hand in the car. Uber keeps 20% of the fare and pays 80% to the driver. 43 This direct payment to drivers eliminates the traditional middleman or dispatcher at a taxi company. In addition, passengers are able to rate drivers, and drivers are also able to rate passengers. These ratings allow passengers and drivers to make quick decisions on whether or not to work together. Despite its success in creating a viable substitute for taxis and limos, Uber has been criticized by taxi and limo services for inadequate driver screening and training and by customers for its practice of surge pricing. With surge pricing, the company moderates the fares that passengers pay based on the level of demand. For instance, Uber pricing tends to increase during peak holidays, snowstorms, and at 2 a.m. on weekends when many bars close. These criticisms have led to concerns about passenger safety and renewed calls for local municipalities to regulate the company. As the company expands, it will undoubtedly have to contend with potential regulation from local municipalities and increased competition from local taxi and limo companies. Potentially more concerning to Uber is that Google may soon enter the market and offer its own substitute for local transportation. Though Google invested over $250 million in Uber in 2013, the company announced its plans to sever its relationship in 2015. Google is exploring an Uber-like service of its own using its Google Maps as a precursor to a future transportation system that includes self-driving cars. 14 Many industries today face the threat of substitutes. A substitute could be a competitor's product or some other product that satisfies the same consumer needs. According to the S-Forces model, the very threat of substitute products or services can limit an industry's profit potential by placing a ceiling on the prices the companies in an industry can charge. 47 If they exceed that limit, it can make the industry sufficiently attractive for substitutes to quickly enter the market. Some substitutes are not immediately obvious. For instance, when Southwest Airlines introduced its low point-to-point airfares, the goal was not to compete with traditional airlines. The company sought to offer an alternative to individuals who typically use their cars or the Greyhound bus company to travel relatively short distances. Southwest offers a substitute for car and bus travel as well as an alternative to other airlines. Force 4. The bargaining power of customers. Depending on the industry, a firm's customers may look and act very differently. In some industries, their customers' buyers may have a lot of power over them. You can look at this dynamic between two industries, where one buys from the other, or between two firms where one buys from the other, or between a firm and its individual customers. Let's look at the industry level. Take the case of consumer packaged goods companies that sell their products to large retailers like Walmart and Costco. Because their customers are large and powerful, they're under a lot of pressure to offer their products at the lowest possible cost, leading to very low margins and profits. The only way to mitigate this issue is by being large and powerful, such as a Procter & Gamble P&G. In P&G's case, they can exert a countervailing power, which can lead to a more balanced relationship. Another example can be seen with steel manufacturers. Their customers are typically large corporations, automakers, or personal appliance manufacturers. For instance, large customers such as automobile manufacturers are likely to have a lot of power over this industry by virtue of how much they buy from them. The point is that different types of customers can exert different levels of pressure on a company based on their bargaining power. A buyer industry will tend to have high power relative to the supplier industry when the buyer purchases in very large volumes or when the supplier's products are largely undifferentiated. In these cases, the buyer or customer has the power to force down prices in an industry. Let's look at an example that demonstrates customer power in action. The steel industry was dominated by a few integrated producers for much of the 20th century. In 1950, the big three steel producers, U.S. Steel, Bethlehem Steel, and Republic Steel, produced approximately 60% of the total steel produced in the United States. During this period, successful steel producers were well-capitalized firms that exercised tremendous supplier power over buyers. 49 Most buyers often had little choice but to purchase steel from the producer located closest to their plant, as transporting steel was a significant cost. However, bargaining power began to shift during the late 1950s and early 1960s when foreign competitors entered the market. During this period, large, integrated Japanese producers became the dominant exporters into the U.S. market. Through manufacturing enhancements, Japanese companies steadily increased their productivity and were able to overcome the additional transportation costs they incurred to ship their products to the United States. The Japanese could achieve this price leadership because their entire steel industry was essentially rebuilt with newer technology following World War II. This more efficient technology, coupled with government aid and lower labor costs, allowed Japanese producers to beat their U.S. competitors on price, even with the added transportation costs. As imported steel flooded the U.S. market, steel buyers began to exercise more power over steel companies that produced largely undifferentiated products. As the power shifted from supplier to buyer in the steel industry, many steel firms experienced a decline in both market share and profitability. 52 The shift in bargaining power, coupled with extremely high legacy cost structures, led to a permanent decline in the fortunes of U.S. steel producers. By 2002, the second, third, and fifth largest U.S. steel producers had all declared bankruptcy. 53 10 years later, the U.S. steel industry was still struggling with cheaper imports, but this time they were dealing with a new type of competitor, government-subsidized steel producers in China and South Korea. The government subsidies in these countries allowed steel producers to export steel at very low prices, increasing the bargaining power of customers and further eroding the U.S. steel industry. Almost 1,000 U.S. steel workers lost their jobs in 2014 due to the impact of these cheaper imports. $4. Characteristics of a powerful customer group. As we saw in the case of the steel industry, powerful customer groups can harm a company by exacting both price and quality pressures on their sellers. A customer group can come in the form of large individual customers or a group of customers that comes together to coordinate a form of collective buying. In general, a customer group will tend to have power in the following circumstances. The group is concentrated or purchases in large volumes relative to the supplier. Walmart exerts extreme buyer power over a number of firms because of its size. As the largest retailer in the world, Walmart is often the largest customer of many firms. Because of its size and scope, Walmart is able to exert downward price pressure on its suppliers. Walmart and Amazon have had a similar impact on the book publishing industry. Both have forced publishers to reduce prices, even on their best sellers. The sellers' products are undifferentiated. We saw this type of bargaining power in the example of the steel industry. Most steel companies produced a largely undifferentiated product that was ultimately vulnerable to lower price competitors. Buyers face few switching costs in changing vendors. Switching costs tend to be low in several industries, including the paper and office supply industry. Paper and office supplies are generally cheap commodities which can be purchased from numerous suppliers. This means the sellers of office supplies face very powerful customers. As such, most businesses do not maintain exclusive contracts with a particular office supplies firm, often switching suppliers based on price. Buyers could potentially integrate backward to produce the industry's product. Automobile manufacturers, General Motors, GM, and Ford, produce some car components themselves, but they also rely on a large group of suppliers for the hundreds of parts that are needed to assemble a completed car. Given GM and Ford's vast manufacturing capabilities, they could easily produce more parts in-house. It is this threat of backward integration that enables the large automobile manufacturers to exert pressure on their suppliers to cost-effectively deliver parts. Force 5. The rivalry among existing competitors. The intensity of rivalry among firms in an industry also shapes its long-term profitability. Some industries are marked by intense rivalry, with firms competing on a whole range of factors including price, service, variety, and product introduction. In certain intense rivalries, the potential for profit is reduced as each competitor seeks to outdo the other rather than focus on a specific niche or a set of activities. Conditions that promote intense rivalry and price competition. In general, industry rivalry will be most intense and lead to depressed industry profitability when competition focuses mainly on price. Under the following circumstances, competition and rivalry will be greatest. The product or service offered by the industry lacks differentiation and has low switching costs for its buyers. Most commodity markets, for example, sugar, cocoa, and wheat exhibit this type of rivalry because their products are usually indistinguishable from each other and, at the same time, it's easy for buyers to switch from one seller to the other at no additional cost. Fixed costs for firms in the industry are high, and marginal costs are low. Fixed costs are the costs you must incur upfront regardless of how much or how little you produce. Marginal costs are the costs incurred to produce every additional unit output. The airline industry has relatively high fixed costs, and, at the same time, quite low marginal costs. The fixed costs are in the form of purchasing airplanes, gates, a ticketing system, and so on. Once a plane is scheduled to go from one place to another, the marginal cost of adding one additional passenger is low. This combination of high fixed costs and low marginal costs is a recipe for intense competition because, once you have incurred the fixed costs, you are inclined to use the investment you have made. Otherwise, it will be wasted. An airline would be loath to have its planes inactive while they have to make lease payments and also cover the payroll of its entire staff. From their vantage point, all they can see are the marginal costs of adding more passengers to their flights, and this, in turn, leads many to lower their prices right up to their marginal costs, which can often result in low or no profits. As such, in the airline industry, firms are often encouraged to price close to their marginal costs when the plane has capacity to cover at least a portion of the fixed costs. This is true for other travel-based businesses that often offer attractive last-minute deals to entice customers. The movie theater business is another example of a low marginal cost operation, but with relatively high fixed costs. Capacity must be expanded in large increments. In industries where there are economies of scale, and it is not cost-effective for a firm to manufacture low volumes of products, another dynamic can arise that leads to greater competition. In such contexts, not only are the setup costs to initiate production very large, which warrants a correspondingly large output, but in addition, production capacity is only augmented in large batch increments. This means that when any firm wants to increase its capacity, they cannot do it in small increments. Instead, the technology requires them to increase it in large chunks. Sometimes the market is not ready for such a large increase in output, causing the industry to go from a shortage to a surplus. This, in turn, leads to a price decline. This dynamic is quite common in several large-scale industries, such as chemicals. The product is perishable. In industries where the product is perishable, the seller may be pressured to sell at any price before their product is of no use. This happens not only in obvious cases like food and meats, but in other contexts as well. Many technology-focused products, such as microprocessors, are subject to this type of rivalry where the components sold can become obsolete within months. The same is true for the personal electronics industry. As the speed of innovation quickens, firms stuck with last-generation models will be tempted to cut prices significantly to unload outdated products. Competitors are numerous or are roughly equal in size and power. This type of rivalry often occurs in local service industries, for example, dry cleaning, in which numerous undifferentiated competitors compete in a low-growth market, and with all rivals of similar size, they jockey to outdo each other. Industry growth is slow. In the breakfast cereal market, consumption growth has been slow for the last decade. When the pie stops growing, then the players involved work harder to capture a larger share of it. As a result, competitors such as General Mills and Kellogg have competed intensely on price. Exit barriers are high. Sometimes the costs of exiting a business can be prohibitive, which can force a business to operate much longer than it should. In the steel industry, exit barriers were historically high, as producers faced numerous legacy and environmental costs regardless of whether they were operating. As a result, many U.S. steel producers remained in business despite annual operating losses to the detriment of the entire industry. Limits of the 5 forces model. Over the years, many have questioned the usefulness of the 5 forces model because it typically looks at an industry at one point in time. However, competition is driven by constantly changing competitive dynamics, and these changes must be monitored since they can impact the overall attractiveness of the industry. At the same time, these forces are not a given, but rather can be shaped by the actors in those industries over time. For IBM, the PC industry became a structurally difficult industry overnight when IBM decided to outsource the major components of its system to competitors. Despite these criticisms, the S-forces model remains one of the most important tools for evaluating the attractiveness of industries and developing business-level strategy. While industries vary in their exposure to specific forces, it seems clear that the 5 forces generally work to increase or decrease profit potential. See Figure 5.6. Managers should use this tool before, during, and after they enter a market or an industry to better understand its structural components. This tool is particularly useful in helping managers decide where to focus their attention. The forces provide a guide for making strategic choices, such as how and where to compete. Not all forces are equally relevant in an industry. The analysis of the 5 forces in an industry should help managers identify which are most important for them. A different view. Strategic planning in the public sector. The United States Postal Service. The United States Postal Service USPS, a national institution since 1775, has lost billions of dollars in business primarily to a substitute that emerged in the form of the internet. At the same time, the rivalry they faced with FedEx, UPS, DHL, and other parcel companies continued unabated. Between 1999 and 2014, USPS mail volume decreased 25% to 158.4 billion pieces, 45 in contrast. 50 billion text messages were expected to be sent each day in 2014, 46 to improve their bottom line. The USPS has identified tactics such as laying off employees, decreasing hours of service, closing post offices, and eliminating retirement benefits. However, as a government agency, it has always been the responsibility of Congress to decide what strategies to implement and to financially support the USPS if necessary. 1. As the internet boomed, what strategies could the USPS have implemented to increase their bottom line and to prevent the dire situation that they are in right now? 2. What strategies have the USPS identified to increase their bottom line that Congress should approve? Are there other strategies they should be thinking about? 3. What other organizations rely on the government to determine strategy? Is there anything that the USPS could learn from those organizations? Figure 5.6. 5 forces impact impact on industry profitability, high barriers to entry limited competitors, lack of substitutes, and low buyer and supplier power drives increased industry profitability. Conversely, low barriers to entry, many competitors, several substitutes, high buyer and supplier power drives decreased industry profitability. How a firm's internal environment impacts strategy. Up to this point, we've focused a discussion on the evaluation of a firm's external environment or industry structure. We discussed the different profit potentials of industries and introduced a tool, the 5 forces model, to evaluate the attractiveness of a particular industry. We haven't fully discussed how the internal environment of a firm affects the development of strategy and the performance of the firm. A firm's internal resources can be just as important as the industry context. To create a lasting competitive advantage, managers must rely on both superior internal resources and favorable industry dynamics. The focus on internal resources as a source of competitive advantage was derived from an analysis of why certain firms in attractive industries perform poorly and why certain firms in unattractive industries perform well. The difference seemed to be related to factors within the firm itself. 57 This led researchers to examine a series of firm-level activities, processes, or resources that distinguished winners from losers. Resource-based view of the firm. The idea that a firm is a collection of resources is often referred to as the resource-based view of the firm. This theory, originally developed in the 1990s, states that resources are strengths that firms can use to conceive of and implement their strategies. Based on this theory, a firm can develop a competitive advantage through the collection and harvesting of resources. The theory also assumes that not all firms have the same resources and capabilities within the same industry, and that these advantages can be long-lasting. The other insight that can be gained from the resource-based view of a firm involves the firm's relationship with the external environment. 61 External forces such as government, regulatory bodies, consumer tastes, competitors, and demographics are constantly evolving. A company with a useful and profitable product may one day discover that the market for its product is no longer relevant. As the environment changes, a firm needs to reassess its internal resources to ensure that they're still relevant for the market in which it is trying to compete. If not, the firm needs to create or develop new internal resources and capabilities. 62 In general, long-term success depends on management's willingness and ability to adopt a learning mindset. 63 This learning mindset, in turn, will help managers to become more attuned to the impact of changes in the environment. 64 Now that we've established the importance of a firm's resources, let's look at examples of specific resource categories that every firm maintains. Company resources. All firms have a long list of resources. To many, a firm's resources are the most recognizable aspect of their business. Certain resources, for instance, plant and equipment, can be valued and sold readily. Other resources, for example, employees or patents, are less easily valued and rarely sold. For a company such as Toyota, all of these resources are important. As we saw in Chapter 4, this system, or fit among its resources and activities, enables Toyota to maintain a competitive advantage in its industry. For Toyota and other companies, resources can be classified under 3 categories: tangible resources, intangible resources, and human resources. Tangible resources. A firm's tangible resources tend to be most recognizable. They often include a firm's plant and equipment, or what it uses to manufacture products. Other types of tangible resources include real estate, inventory, raw materials, and computing systems. At Toyota, the tangible resources are important and numerous. For example, Toyota has 68 manufacturing companies around the world, including 11 in North America. 65 These automobile manufacturing facilities represent one of the largest assets on Toyota's balance sheet. The company also has significant tangible resources in the form of real estate around the world. Toyota has used a strategy of situating its tangible resources, auto plants, in lower-income rural areas in the United States. This strategy evolved in the 1980s when the US government placed restrictions on the number of foreign imported cars coming into the country. Toyota maneuvered around these restrictions by locating plants inside the United States. To overcome the higher labor costs inherent in the US market, Toyota placed its plants in rural areas, away from traditional car manufacturing areas such as Detroit. With this strategic decision, Toyota has been able to reduce the labor component of its cars and extract concessions from state governments trying to attract industry to rural areas. Intangible resources. While a firm's tangible resources are easy to visualize, its intangible resources may not be as familiar. They often include a firm's internal processes or systems, brand names, technology, culture, and intellectual property. At Toyota, the intangible resources are a little harder to describe, but they are just as important. As we saw in Chapter 4, Toyota has become legendary through its Toyota production system. This system is a combination of the manufacturing line and processes the company uses to assemble cars. While the line may look like one in any other automobile plant, it is vastly different in its philosophy and the processes that govern it. For example, above each worker's head is a device called an and cord. A worker can pull the cord when he or she encounters a problem at his or her workstation. A supervisor then comes to the station, and both of them try to troubleshoot the problem. If the problem is not correctable in a certain amount of time, the worker or the supervisor pulls the cord again, and the line stops until the problem is fixed. The philosophy behind this mechanism is to prevent errors in manufacturing from accumulating, which can require costly rework. Toyota encourages every line worker to look for ways to make its processes more efficient. While this system may sound simple, competitors have found it nearly impossible to replicate. It is intimately intertwined in the Toyota manufacturing environment, and is, by all accounts, an intangible resource. Human resources. Finally, a firm's human resources include employees of all levels, from entry-level workers to the CEO. For some firms, their human resources are their primary resource. Consider consulting or accounting firms, for example. While each of these firms may have proprietary processes, models, or frameworks that they use to solve clients' problems, their most important assets are their employees, who put these ideas and models to use. When a star performer or a client manager leaves a firm, the company loses a big source of value. Toyota's human resources are just as important as its tangible and intangible resources. As noted, Toyota's production system has been the envy of the automobile industry for decades. The model is studied and scrutinized by managers and academics around the world with the hope of finding other industrial applications for it. And while some of the structural components of the system, such as the and cord, are important, Toyota's line employees are just as important. Toyota recruits workers who possess not only certain technical skills but also certain key attributes. For example, the ability to troubleshoot, to think creatively, and to work as part of a team. As we've seen from these examples, Toyota has created its famous production system through the use of its many resources. With all of this success, customers and competitors have taken notice. In fact, Toyota recently surpassed General Motors as the largest car maker in the world and has been the most profitable car maker for the last decade. Many firms have attempted to replicate the Toyota production system in their factories. To this end, many firms have asked and been granted permission to tour Toyota's facilities to see how it operates. You may be asking, why would Toyota allow its competitors to get a glimpse of its vaunted production system? Wouldn't this allow its competitors to copy the activities, obtain similar resources, and thus erode Toyota's competitive advantage? Well, the reason Toyota allows competitors to tour its facility is based on something we talked about in Chapter 4. The idea is that, while a firm's activities and resources are important, they are only a part of the picture. A firm must create a system in which all of these activities fit together, allowing the firm to develop specific core competencies to create a sustainable competitive advantage. 66 Toyota knows that other firms will be able to replicate certain activities from its production system, but Toyota also knows that no company will be able to replicate the entire system. The firm is a value chain. Firms that are successful for a long time possess unique resources that help them pursue a defensible strategy. One way to better understand how a firm's resources can support the firm's strategy is to conduct a value chain analysis. This analysis is a systematic way of examining all of the activities a firm performs and determining how they interact to gain competitive advantage. Value chain analysis separates a firm into its various activities to better understand total costs in the system and potential sources of firm differentiation. 67 As many of the examples in this chapter have shown, all firms possess a unique set of activities that they perform to bring their product or service to market. Primary and support activities. The firm's value chain can be divided into two major activities: primary activities and support activities. See Figure 5.7. Primary activities refer to the activities involved in the physical creation of the product and its sale and transfer to the buyers. 68. The primary activities of a firm can be divided into 5 categories: inbound logistics, operations; outbound logistics, marketing and sales and service. Support activities provide the support necessary for the primary activities to occur. The support activities of a firm can be divided into 4 categories: firm infrastructure, human resource management, technology development, and procurement. The firm's primary and secondary activities are defined in greater detail in tables 5.1 and tables 5.2. Value systems. Through value chain analysis, a manager should attempt to analyze 3 aspects of the firm's overall value system. First, the manager can study how the firm uses its resources and capabilities to develop core competencies. To be a source of competitive advantage, a capability must allow a firm to perform a primary or support activity better than its competitors do. For example, the manager may discover through this process that the firm's main value-adding activity resides in the marketing and sales function of the organization. The manager may also discover that outbound logistics has presented a major challenge for the company. Through these realizations, the manager can then seek to emphasize the value-creating activities and improve those that do not add value. Second, the manager must compare the firm's value chain with competitors' value chains to better understand the competitive forces in the market and to determine how to improve the firm's value creating activities and gain advantage over its competitors. Finally, managers must view the firm's value chain in the context of a larger value system that includes the value chains of suppliers and distribution channels. By studying these other value chains, the manager can better understand the connections among the different systems involved in bringing a product to market. Understanding these connections can enhance a firm's competitive advantage. Toyota has regularly accomplished this by creating tight links with its suppliers through sharing data and processes. Table 5.1. Primary activities. Inbound logistics. Activities such as materials handling, warehousing, and inventory control that are used to receive, store, and disseminate inputs to a product. Operations. Activities necessary to convert the inputs provided by inbound logistics into final product form. Machining, packaging, assembly, and equipment maintenance are examples of operations activities. Outbound logistics. Activities involved with collecting, storing, and physically distributing the final product to customers. Examples of these activities include warehousing, material handling, and order processing, marketing and sales. Activities completed to provide the means through which customers can purchase products. To effectively market and sell products, firms develop advertising and promotional campaigns, select appropriate distribution channels, and hire, develop, and support their sales force. Service. Activities designed to enhance or maintain a product's value. Firms engage in a range of service-related activities, including installation, repair, training, and adjustment. Table 5.2. Support activities. Procurement. Activities completed to purchase the inputs needed to produce a firm's products. Purchased inputs include items fully consumed during the manufacture of products, for example, raw materials and supplies, as well as fixed assets, machinery, lab equipment, office equipment, and buildings. Technological development. Activities completed to improve a firm's product and the processes used to manufacture it. Technology development takes many forms, such as process equipment design, basic research and product design, and servicing procedures. Human resource management. Activities involved with recruiting, hiring, training, developing, and compensating all personnel. Firm infrastructure. Activities such as general management, planning, finance, accounting, legal support, and governmental relations that are required to support the work of the entire value chain. SWOT analysis. One tool that has been useful in helping managers better understand their internal and external environments along with the linkage between them is called SWOT analysis. This simple tool allows managers to take a snapshot of their firm's internal strengths and weaknesses as well as the opportunities and threats that are evident in the external environment. See Figure 5.8. Internal strengths might include specific human resources skills, proprietary technology, or lean manufacturing techniques. These items generally enable the organization to function more efficiently than its competitors do and are key aspects in the company's value chain. Weaknesses are potential vulnerable aspects in a firm's operations. These may include an older plant and equipment, an aging workforce, or a dependence on a certain supplier for core materials. The opportunities and threats aspect of the analysis encompasses many of the techniques discussed in Chapter 1, including environmental scanning and contingency planning. These activities are core components of gaining a better understanding of the contextual landscape. Key questions of this analysis typically include the following: what core internal resources set us apart from the competition? What is a unique selling proposition or core competitive advantage? In what internal areas are we vulnerable? What capabilities do we need to develop? In what ways is the external context changing? What is our position relative to the S-forces within the industry? What opportunities or threats do these changes present? SWOT analysis is one way to combine a manager's understanding of the external environment in relation to his or her firm's capabilities and competitive advantage. 72. Like the S-forces model, the SWOT analysis presents a snapshot of the firm at one point in time, but requires managers to think about current and future opportunities and threats. 73. To be effective, the analysis should be revisited on a regular basis and should be the basis of strategic action, not just an isolated academic exercise. Firms that adapt their strategic approaches to the realities of the context in which they operate tend to perform better than those that stick to a rigid strategy. By doing so, a firm can maintain a higher level of strategic flexibility, the capability to identify and react to changes in the external environment and to mobilize internal resources to deal with those changes. Competitive advantage. By understanding the forces in the external environment and the resources within the firm's internal environment, a manager is better equipped to assess how the firm can develop a strategy to achieve a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Competitive advantage derives from a firm's ability to create value for its customers that exceeds the cost of producing the product or service. 76. Value refers to the amount consumers are willing to pay for a product or service, and it comes from offering a lower price than that of competitors or providing a unique product whose benefits outweigh a higher potential cost to consumers. A competitive advantage in an industry is the result of creating a strategy that will allow a firm to outperform its competitors. Southwest Airlines was able to build a competitive advantage over rival airlines by creating a system of low-cost activities that brought affordable air travel to customers. It did so in an industry that is considered structurally weak by neutralizing the unattractive features and exploiting the attractive elements of the industry. 78. We also saw how Billy Beane of the Oakland Athletics developed a competitive advantage by discovering new techniques for evaluating baseball players. These organizations were able to maintain a competitive advantage by creating value through the development of core competencies that rivals could not match. 79. Competitive advantage can come from 3 generic strategies that a manager can choose. For the firm, cost leadership, differentiation, and focus. The focus strategy is just a variant of the first two, where the manager chooses to target a smaller segment than usual through cost leadership or differentiation. See Figure 5.9. Cost leadership. A company that pursues a cost leadership strategy aims to provide a product or service at as low a price as possible to a broad audience. For firms competing on cost leadership, several important trade-offs are necessary in designing the activities they will perform. These trade-offs are often centered on price and product features or price and product quality. The goal of such firms is to offer a basic set of features with acceptable quality at the lowest possible price to the largest possible group of customers. If possible, it strives to be able to price its product or service below the cost of all competitors. The ideal goal here is to have a cost advantage over competition that is greater than the price disadvantage, allowing the firm to have greater margins than its competition. The sources of cost advantage that help to reduce a firm's cost may include economies of scale, proprietary technology, or unique access to raw materials. $0 economies of scale are achieved when the large volume of a product produced by a firm enables it to reduce the per unit cost. In this way, a firm's fixed costs are spread across more units. Walmart is a classic example of a firm that has such an advantage. In a cost leadership strategy, the manager must continuously pursue multiple sources of low-cost advantage to compete effectively. While it is important to seek multiple sources of low-cost advantage, a manager must also consider its position in comparison to its competitors in the market. For example, a firm's product cannot be so different or inferior from that of its competitors in the industry that the customer no longer recognizes the product as a viable alternative. If buyers don't see the product as being comparable, a firm might be forced to discount its offerings. $in industries where several firms compete to be the cost leader, competition is usually fierce, with some players sometimes selling items below cost to gain or retain market share. By establishing itself as the dominant lowest cost producer in an industry, a firm can often dissuade others from pursuing low-cost strategies, and in so doing, it can gain a competitive advantage. 82 Walmart, on their way to becoming the world's largest company, has translated an extremely efficient distribution system into low operating costs. These low costs help them offer prices that are impossible for other retailers to match. As a result, most others have shied away from going head-to-head with Walmart on price. Now that we've established some of the key components of cost leadership, let's look at another firm that successfully employs this strategy, the Vanguard Group. The Vanguard Group is one of the largest asset managers in the United States, with over $2.5 trillion in assets under management and 12,000 employees at the end of 2014.83. Vanguard provides individual and institutional investors with mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, bonds, certificates of deposits, annuities, 529 college savings plans, brokerage services, and investment advisory services. The majority of Vanguard's assets are housed in instruments called mutual funds. Vanguard's mutual fund business is among the largest in the United States, competing with players such as Fidelity Investments and T. Rowe Price. Unlike many other mutual fund companies, Vanguard primarily distributes its funds directly to consumers rather than through outside brokerage houses. From inception, Vanguard has focused all of its activities on bringing low-cost and high-quality service to customers. The company's average expense ratio is among the lowest in the business, 85, and all of its mutual funds are no-load funds, which have no transaction costs because they are sold without commission or sales charges. Another component of Vanguard's low-cost approach involves promoting index funds. Index funds typically mirror a major market index such as the S&P 500 and allow the investor to own a broad array of stocks. This model offers the investor diversification and low trading costs as the fund manager constructs the portfolio and does not make changes unless a company falls out of the mirrored index. In contrast, managers of non-indexed mutual funds may buy or sell different stocks for a fund on a weekly or even daily basis, increasing overall costs for the investor. While Vanguard focuses primarily on index funds, it also offers actively managed mutual funds similar to those at Fidelity. Through this activity, Vanguard is able to meet some of the differentiation measures that other firms have established, yet still maintains its overall cost leadership focus. Vanguard also performs other activities that lead to its cost leadership position in the industry. The firm rarely advertises in traditional media, preferring word-of-mouth publicity instead. Most of the firm's transactions occur on the web, in contrast to many firms that conduct trades by phone. This web approach creates a much lower cost per transaction than that of many of its competitors. As you can see by Vanguard's activities, every aspect of the business revolves around bringing low costs to the consumer. See figure 5.10. While many competitors have attempted to copy some of Vanguard's activities by offering their own index funds, Vanguard has been able to maintain its strategic position because of the fit among its activities created by promoting low cost in every aspect of the business. Case in point, the Vanguard Group. How has the Vanguard Group positioned itself as an asset management firm? Map out the activities that support the core components of the Vanguard Group's low-cost strategy. How does a low-cost strategy create value for the Vanguard Group's customers? Elaborate on why you think competitors have not succeeded at imitating the Vanguard Group strategy. Differentiation. When pursuing a differentiation strategy, a firm seeks to be unique in its industry along a dimension or a group of dimensions that are valued by consumers and can command a premium price, $6. To accomplish this, a firm must position itself to offer certain product attributes or services that customers value and competitors cannot easily replicate. In contrast to cost leadership, consumers should be willing to pay a premium price for that firm's product. 87 Differentiation can be based on a broad range of factors, including product features, service offerings, distribution systems.